The Atlanta Falcons made a shocking announcement following their preseason Week 2 loss against the Ravens, and that was Raheem Morris saying, "We've seen everything we need to see from Mike," being Michael Penix, "and we want to see him for the rest of the preseason," after sitting Penix in Week 2 of the preseason. I want to talk about the Falcons' decision to shut down Michael Penix for no real reason given other than we like what we've seen so far and we don't need to see any more. What? And I want to talk about some other news on the roster side of things with the Falcons cutting a wide receiver and a potential replacement in free agency. But let me just have a few moments of your time to talk about Michael Penix being shut down for the last 2 weeks of preseason. Not due to injury, not due to any off-the-field issue, at least nothing that's been public or presented to the media, just we like what we saw in preseason Week 1. We don't need to see any more. Excuse me? You don't need to see any more of your first-round draft pick? You only needed to see 16 passes in his entire rookie season? Because I don't think the plan is to have him play a single snap in the regular season if all goes well with Kirk Cousins. So you're going to hold on to 16 pass attempts for his entire rookie season, voluntarily, by the way, which a lot of teams like the Vikings right now would kill to get more J.J. McCarthy on the field, because in that lone preseason game against the Dolphins, you saw everything there is to see about Penix. I truly cannot understand or comprehend this decision. I feel like I'm Ricky Bobby when he's like, I got a soft serve pretzel in my head. I cannot make sense of this. I mean, I saw a lot of wild theories tossed out there as to why Penix isn't playing. One of them was the Falcons realized that Penix is better than Kirk Cousins, and they don't want to have Penix outshine Cousins. I don't think that's true or even legitimate. For starters, every report coming out of training camp has been Kirk Cousins has been lighting it up. Michael Penix has been doing well, but he still looks like a rookie at times. No reporter has come out and said, you know what, unpopular opinion, Michael Penix has outperformed Kirk Cousins so far. And even if that was true, that's a bad thing. Like, the Falcons took Penix 8th overall. They clearly value him very highly. And sure, it would be a waste of money on Kirk Cousins, but I think they want to win right now, and they're not going to bench the better quarterback if that's the case here, because they don't want to be embarrassed. What's going to be embarrassing is if they don't play the better quarterback. So I don't give that any sort of substance or belief whatsoever. I'm truly at a loss. Like, I am looking for ideas or explanations as to why the Falcons are not playing Michael Penix. Is it truly just based in fear of injury? That can be the only legitimate explanation. That they feel like, hey, he doesn't need any more development. We can work on him in practice. We don't need to risk injury in the preseason, which that's the case for a lot of guys, and understandably so. But every other rookie is playing in the preseason. I don't think Michael Penix is a finished product. Like, what we saw from him in Miami, there were some really good passes. Don't get me wrong. I didn't think that in those 16 pass attempts, we saw a guy that's a future Hall of Famer. Like, there's plenty to work on, and for a guy like Penix who isn't going to have a chance to work on his game in the regular season, they should maximize his 3 preseason games so they can spend the entire upcoming calendar year giving Penix things to work on from the film in the preseason, going, hey, this is the NFL speed. It's not the same as college. These are some areas we want to see you improve in. They don't have that opportunity now. You're going to have practice, but we can't pretend that practice is the same as an NFL game. It's not the same speed. There's no do-over button. Like, I just cannot wrap my head around why the Falcons are sitting down and shutting down Penix for the rest of the preseason voluntarily. I feel like there has to be some sort of, major scandal going on, because it's just so mind-blowing. I've never seen a whole fan base completely agree on any one thing. If I had suggested, and by the way, if you're in support of Penix not playing, you're probably just in support of, hey, whatever the coach says is probably the right decision. They're smarter than I am. And I used to feel that same way too, until like the Raiders botched all those draft picks. And I was like, I was sitting on my couch thinking I can do a better job. And it turns out I could have. And the same goes for a lot of decisions the Falcons have made. But if you're in support of Penix not playing, let me ask you this one question. If I had suggested after the first preseason game, unpopular opinion, I don't think Penix should play the next 2 weeks, would you have agreed with me? Probably not. You probably would have said, no, you have the worst takes. This is why I never listened to you. He absolutely should play. But once it comes from Raheem Morris, it's actually got some really good ideas. This seems like a big mistake to me. It seems like a mistake. So let me know what you think. Should Michael Penix play in all 3 preseason games? I would be, if it were up to me, play him however much you wanted to in preseason week 1, a quarter and a half, whatever. And then I would say preseason week 2, let Penix have the first quarter. Let Taylor Heineke and John Paddock duke it out for QB3 over the next 3 quarters. And then week 3 of the preseason, Kirk Cousins should have 10 plays, whether that's all in one series or 2 short series. And then Michael Penix plays the rest of the game. We don't need to learn anything from Heineke or Paddock after 2 preseason games and all the practices. You should give Michael Penix as many reps as possible so he can try and get up to NFL game speed. For when that day is called, he doesn't have 1 preseason game to go off of. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. All right, before we talk about some roster moves that were made by the Falcons, I want to tell everyone watching about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. I'm talking turning $10 into $1,000. So let me give you an example of the selections I'm rolling with for this upcoming season. I like the less on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards. I just feel like that wide receiver room is finally going to catch up to them, and that's a big number. I like the more on Tyreek Hill and Saquon's yardage. And then finally, the more on Garrett Wilson receptions, being Aaron Rodgers' #1 target. So if you like my selections, download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So some roster news to get to here. Josh Kendall, tweeted out, the Falcons released wide receiver James Washington to make room for newly acquired safety Justin Simmons. Obviously, there had to be a corresponding move to an addition being made, and this is like the rare instance of no one got hurt in the preseason, which I feel like there's always one guy that gets lost for the season, and that unfortunately for James Washington, but fortunately for the coaching staff, forced them to move on from a player, and that was James Washington, which he was only here for a week. But I felt like moving on from a wide receiver was an interesting decision. Like, they lost Jakeem Grant to the retired list. They lost Rondale Moore for the entire season. You're down 2 of your higher-end guys, and you decide, let's move on from another wide receiver, but this time voluntarily. I'm sure that there were some, Washington only being there for a week, there were some good arguments to be made if he didn't impress them in that short time span. But to me, I felt like the wide receiver room is the one squeaky wheel after adding Matt Judon and Justin Simmons, which still doesn't feel real. I'm super excited to see them suit up in week 1. But wide receiver is the last piece of the puzzle, I feel like, for this roster. And you could use as many bullets in that chamber to try and find the top 5 or 6 guys. And voluntarily moving on from one is a surprise. So I have one last request. I know I've been very needy this offseason. The Falcons have fulfilled a handful of my requests, like Simmons and Judon. The last one, Terry, I know you're watching. Sign a wide receiver. You need another wide receiver. You're going to be running an offense that is predicated on passing. that's predicated on multiple wide receiver sets, you need to have strength in numbers. It's not even about having the top 3 wide receivers. I'm saying you need to have depth in case injuries pop up, because your wide receivers are going to get way more usage and more snaps equals higher risk of injury than ever before as the Falcons GM, and you should have a good backup plan. If you do not have a backup plan in the NFL, you are likely destined to fail. That's just the way it rolls with how many injuries are a part of this game. So who could they go out and add? Hunter Renfrow is maybe the best name on the street, which I'll add. There are not a lot of great names on the street right now. I mean, Renfrow last season, 17 games, 255 yards. For whatever reason, he was on Josh McDaniels' shit list, which is kind of weird because you would think Josh McDaniels, a Bill Belichick disciple who loved his white slot wide receivers, would just gravitate towards Renfrow, but that didn't happen. But the Falcons are one injury away from a major problem. Now, hopefully they stay healthy and they never have to worry about this, but are we really going to bank on a whole room staying healthy when you've already lost one guy in the preseason and your third wide receiver is a career special teamer with 765 career receiving yards in 8 seasons? That doesn't seem like a great bet to make. Now, if they don't want to go sign Hunter Renfrow because he's too expensive, although he's not going to be expensive at all, they could wait for roster cutdown day. Here's a list of names that I saw that could be cut at the wide receiver position. Willie Snead from the Dolphins, Tyquan Thornton, former second-round draft pick by the Patriots. Ton of speed right there. That's the direction the Falcons want to go. Russell Gage, familiar face. I'd be very open to a reunion with him. Steven Sims, Phillip Dorsett. Kadarius Toney, he sucks, so don't bring him in. Isaiah Hodgins, Allen Robinson, probably the most successful for sure receiver of the bunch, but his play style has not aged well with his lack of separation ability as his speed goes down, as his age goes up. So Hunter Renfrow, I feel like, might be their best option at this point. I really feel like they should go out and get another wide receiver for a handful of reasons, like I've already mentioned. Not just the possibility of an injury, because that's not a guarantee, but because they are going to be an offense that signed a $180 million quarterback to pass the football. You should have some depth at wide receiver. And right now, their first few guys off the bench are special teamers Kadarius Hodge and preseason Prince Chris Blair. We'll see how that translates to the regular season, but I wouldn't bet on that. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us this Sunday night. We're going to sign off, and we'll catch up with you all later.